welcome. Thank you all for coming. So this is term limits debate, and something we've never done before with Young Republicans, so we are hosting it as a way to get the word out, help people be informed, and so we'd like this to be something that can be put on YouTube or put on Facebook. We have it on Facebook Live right now. If you have anybody who isn't here and wanted to be here, it's on our page, the NUYR Facebook page. And some things to keep in mind, we have audience rules tonight. So this is a formal debate. There will be no yelling, shouting, name-calling, spitting, any of the things you may have seen in some other debates on TV recently. So, we would like this to be the most professional debate happened on exclusively Facebook Live with an audience max of 40 that's happened in North Dakota. So, if you can meet those other parameters and be a professional debate, we'd like to be the one. So, with that in mind, just keep the chatter quiet, please. We don't have mics in here. It's a small room, so we're just doing the audio on the phone there. Our candidates will be presenting. We will have, starting with the view for term limits, and then the view opposing term limits. And I'm going to introduce our candidates in a minute, but with what they're going to be doing tonight, it is a formal debate setting, so they will be doing timed slots, and I'm going to be timekeeping at the moderator table right here. I'm going to be moderating this debate, but basically the candidates will go with their piece for a time, and then they will stop, and then it will transfer to the next candidate. And they will do that for about 45 minutes. And then after 45 minutes of timed moderated debate, we will have a more informal Q&A. And there is paper on the back and pens. So during this debate, if you have any questions, feel free to write down a question for me that I'm going to then field to our candidates. Write down the question, and then at some point in the debate, just bring it up and set it on the table or even the chair right here in the front row. And then when we get to the second part, after about 45 minutes, then we will be doing the Q&A, and I'll be fielding your questions to the candidates. So again, because it is a professional debate, I'm going to be the only one dialoguing with the candidates tonight. It will not be open questions from the audience. So that keeps it just a little bit more easy for everybody to understand what's happening, so we can all hear what the questions are and make sure we keep it timely. So now that we've got that out of the way, we do have treats. Make sure to go grab those from Biddy Bean, official sponsor of all things YR. Thank you. And we will thank Doug for the use of the hotel tonight. He has provided that for us. And lastly, before we start, I would like to say a prayer. So if you would bow your heads with me, please. Heavenly Father, we do thank you for this time to be here, and we have the freedom we know that you have given us to debate as friends even, and that is a good thing. We pray tonight that it would be honoring to you, all that is said, that we would come and go as friends, especially for our candidates, that they would be clear and that their views would be represented well, and that they would be able to get the point across that they are trying to make. We pray that you would help us to lead better as politicians and future politicians, that we would glorify you in all that we do. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right, now I'm going to sit at the moderator's table here, and I will introduce our candidates. So, supporting term limits is Jeff Magrum. Opposing term limits is Doug Larsen. Doug Larsen is tonight's host. Opposing term limits, North Dakota Senator from District 34, owner of Apex Builders, veteran, and a trusted friend of YR. Jeff Magrum hails from District 28. He is supporting term limits. He is the North Dakota representative, hopefully future senator, and a master plumber, the youngest mayor of Hazleton, and a longtime friend of YR. So would you give it up for our candidates, please? All right, with that, we will open up the event by having a general timeline of 6 minutes in support of term limits. So that will be yielding to Jeff to start.
Thanks, Darryl. I'd like to thank the Young Republicans for putting this event on, and very happy to be a supporter of Young Republicans and be part of the whole movement of the Young Republicans, the conservative movement. So I'm Jeff Magrum, and I am on the sponsoring committee of term limits, and I was also a signature gatherer. And I followed this thing through from the beginning. I had a bill last session in the House that would have had a 16-year term limit, same as this, little different method, but it didn't do well. So I was approached afterward, and others said, hey, there's a lot of support for term limits. What do you think? Should we try to get it on the ballot as a measure? And I said, yeah, it would help. So here we are, getting down to a little more than a week left to decide. And that is the question I'd have for everyone here, is are we going to be the 8th state to have 8 and 8 term limits? So, and the term limit, let me explain the term limit. You could serve 8 years in the House or Senate, and then go across the hall and serve 8 years House, Senate. So you can serve a total of 16 years, and it does limit the governor to 2 terms or 8 years. So I think 16 years for the House and Senate has been misconstrued to say just 8. And I'm actually testing the theory because I was in the House for 6, I'm on my 6th year, and now I'm running for the Senate. So I'm testing the theory that you can go across the hall relatively easy. I mean, it wasn't easy, but it's doable. So there are 2 of the fastest growing, freest states in the country that have the 8 and 8. One of them South Dakota, one of them is Florida. And we can argue that the reason there's such free states and conservative states is because of their governor. But looking deeper, you'll find their legislators that are term limited are the foundation for their governors. Not only do they support their governors when the governors need support, they also keep their governors accountable. So they're running very good, efficient states. South Dakota in particular spends $2 billion less than North Dakota per year. So if you go to South Dakota, if you can identify anything that they don't have, that we have, that is so much better for the less expenditures, I would love to hear about it. So the other states, including South Dakota and Florida, that are 8 and 8 are Montana, our neighbor to the west, Arizona, who many snowbirds go there to visit every winter. So Arizona is another one. They had a 74% were in favor when they passed term limits. There's Colorado, Missouri, and Ohio. So in total, 15 states have term limits on legislators. Some of them have a different term than the 8 and 8. And there's 36 states that have term limits on their governor. So that's how important that is. So why the measure? Number one is people want this. There was a poll taken just recently again. Right now, North Dakotans there's 81% of North Dakotans want term limits on their legislators and our governor. Number two, we broke the record when we went out to get signatures. It was unbelievably easy. I had people approaching me after that. All my petitions there, you could get 50 in one packet, and I didn't take enough along one day. And people were approaching me saying, hey, I hear you're getting signatures for term limits. Can I sign? I mean, it was so easy that we broke the state record with over 46,000 signatures. And still some came in after the fact that they were late getting them to us, but we didn't need them. So what kind of results can we expect when we get term limits in North Dakota? For one thing, we're going to have new energy in the legislature, fresh ideas, increase in citizen participation. In all the other states, they saw an increase in citizen participation. Continuity between the House and Senate chambers. Right now, there's always this divide between the Senate and the House. One thinks they're better than the other, more important than the other. You're going to have members going from one side to the other, and you're going to create continuity. People will be working with each other. They had worked together on the other side of the aisle. They'll come over to the House or Senate, vice versa. It'll create a continuity between, and probably people will get along better up there, and it'll stop the information hoarding. Right now, I served in the House. There's major information hoarding because with knowledge is power. So if you have this knowledge and you see this guy coming in that might be a competitor, you're not going to want to share all your information with him because down the road you might lose your chairmanship. And they don't know that when they're going to ever be done in the legislature. They might run for another 30, 40 years. So they don't want to educate the new people coming in that would be competitors. And then, let's face it, the legislature is very competitive. And so that's another thing. We're going to stop the information hoarding. Because right now, the lobbyists really run the legislature for the most part, in a small group of legislators that are long-time serving legislators. They're the ones that run the legislature. And the bureaucrats, what I've seen is bureaucrats are empowered by the long-term serving legislators, because I'll be sitting in a committee, you'll have 10 people come in on their own dime, and they'll come to testify, and when they're all done, the chairman will invite a bureaucrat up that's getting paid to be there, and they'll testify, and the people will listen to the bureaucrat and the lobbyists over their own people. So the bureaucrats are being empowered by the long-term legislators. I mean, when I talk long-term legislators, let's look at some of these. District 35, Bob Martinson, he's been in 46 years. He's running again. He'll get another 4-year term. Ray Holmberg, 45 years, was long-time chairman of the appropriation. If he wouldn't have got in a scandal, I'm sure he'd still be in there. And he is on record as being one of the most powerful legislators for bringing money back to the Grand Forks area. So he disproportionately was bringing money back to his area. Rich Wardner was 31 years. He's still the majority leader in the Senate. And you know, you look at the Senate, two legislators didn't run again because they're claiming there's a toxic environment over there. So I mean, he's been there 31 years. He's got a toxic environment. The majority leader in the House was in 23 years, would have long been termed out. He led our House into being the first state in the union to totally throw out the Constitution, and he actually made North Dakota. We're on the books as the most corrupt legislature in the United States history. So these are the guys that I'm talking about that are running the show. And then we have people that are like a District 7 House member. He's under investigation right now. He would be termed out. He's under investigation for nefarious act, investing with the AG building. We got a legislator from Minot. He was in 11 years now. He'd have been termed out. Drunk driving with a married intern with him last session. I mean, the corruption is there. So them guys would have been termed out already, or they would have gone out, and we'd have new people coming in to fill in spots. But why didn't people take them on? Because incumbents win 95% of the time. It takes a lot of money and a lot of effort to unseat an incumbent. I mean, they have to really, really do bad things to be beatable, or it's going to, the 5%ers, I'm one of them, because I unseated a 41-year incumbent. It's very difficult. It took 2 tries. The second time we unseated him, but he was in 41 years, and his name was big. So yesterday's press conference proved, it was at the Capitol, and it proved what I'm talking about. We had career politicians standing elbow to elbow with lobbyists. Lobbyists were from one wall to the other. It was just all lobbyists and some career politicians opposing the term limit measure. So we know that lobbyists would lose power as they know they're going to term out. Because if you know you're terming out your last 4 years, you're not going to be accountable to the lobbyists. Now you're really going to do your best work, because you're not worried about getting reelected. You're not worrying about the lobbyists having to help you. You can actually do your best work for your people. And when lobbyists say term limits will not be good government, they are referring to a government for them, not for you. That's what they're referring to. And I believe term limits will empower the people.
All right, now an opening statement from Doug Larsen opposing.
When I was a little kid, probably about 7 years old, my grandpa took me in the truck, leaving the farm. Went down a dirt road, pulled up alongside a field, and he said, "Look out to your right. How far can you see? Can you see the tree row? Yeah. Look over here to the left. Can you see where the fence line meets this? Do you see the water tower or the windmill back here? Do you see all of this?" And he explained to me what a section of land was. And he looked at me and he said, "I don't own any of it." And I thought, That is a bizarre thing to say. He looked upset, he looked regretful, and he said it. He said, you know, I got here in 1929. That's when he got to America, 1929. Great timing. It's history buffs. October, about a week after he got here, the Great Depression started. Ended up in North Dakota, ended up doing fine. Farmland was for sale often because people couldn't afford it. He had this opportunity to buy this land. He asked his father-in-law, that had been my great-grandfather, my grandmother's father, if he should buy it. This would really set the family up nice in the future. He got after him and said that he shouldn't, and he was too young, he didn't understand what it was like and how rough it would be, and he'd lose the land, and he should just focus on the little bit that he had. And he left me a message that he would remind me of to the day he died. He said, if you remember one thing from me, it's think with your own head. You might make mistakes, but they're your mistakes. Think with your own head. As we look at this term limit deal, I don't have a chance to unravel everything that Jeff brought up. He brought up a lot of stuff. I'll address some of it in this break, and I'll address it in other rebuttal times. But as we look through here, there's a lot of information that isn't exactly accurate that is being put out. There's a lot of misinformation. I'm going to try to set the record straight. If you are already preconceived that you're going to vote against it, or vote for it, rather, by all means do that. But consider looking into what I say and seeing if maybe I might be right. Term limits, we talk about 8 and 8. I've been in the military for 28 years. I started in the National Guard as a young private. It took me 7 years before I felt comfortable going to officer candidate school. It took me another few years after that till I felt comfortable to be a company commander. I've served 2 companies and I've made it all the way up to lieutenant colonel, and my last command was that of a battalion. The battalion is made up of 4 companies. There's no way that 8-year Doug would have been ready to be a battalion commander. I wouldn't have been ready to be a company commander. Now in the National Guard, we do it 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks of summer. They lie to you when they say 2 weeks of summer. It's actually 15 days. But it is 1 weekend a month. 12 weekends times 2 for both days is 24 training days, plus 15 is 39 training days. Multiply that by 2, that gets you 78. 78 training days in 2 years. It's almost exactly what we give our part-time legislature. In 2020, I thought, it's time. I've always been interested in politics. When I was in college, I was a student body president. I've always been interested in it, but as a commander of various military organizations, the time was never right. I would not have 4 months to dedicate every other year to this deal. With kids in diapers, I didn't think it was all that fair. I'm not saying that people with kids in diapers can't do it, but I just didn't think it was ready and right for me. And then lo and behold, in 2020, the senator from my district decided to retire. Announced that he was going to retire, and my wife and I talked about it for about 4 months. Should we, shouldn't we? God, do we have the time for it? We've got this, we got that. All these reasons not to do it. And finally, in the end, we decided to sign up for, and I say we, she physically wasn't there, but emotionally she was there. We signed up for this campaign school so I could get more information. And I decided that campaign school, and it was sponsored locally, I decided after that campaign school, you know what, I'm going to do this. What the heck? Why not? My opponent happened to be there that day. Now, I assumed my opponent would be multiple opponents. This was an open seat. Dwight Cook had sat in it for 24 years. Clearly, there'd be more than one, right? This was a Thursday. My opponent, singular, was talking to me and said, hey, you going to go to the endorsing convention? Because we haven't even heard about you. Yeah, I know, I just decided today. Well, yeah, the endorsing convention is on Tuesday. This is Thursday. Yeah, well, shoot, I guess I'll see you there. I arrive. There's just me and him. 24 years. There's an opening. There's one person, until I show up, that was going to take that seat. I ran in the endorsing convention and I didn't do so well. I did okay. I lost, but I did okay. And I sat there and I thought, you know, should I let 80 people that are in this room at that time decide who the next state senator from my district is going to be? Or should I challenge him in the primary? God, it'd be a lot of work. It'd be a lot of work. Now, he wasn't an incumbent, but he had been a former head of the Department of Commerce. Knows everybody at the Capitol. At the endorsing convention, the lieutenant governor actually endorsed him. That's knowing people. The governor endorsed him, lieutenant governor endorsed him, an active member of the United States Senate, one of North Dakotas. I won't mention his name. He doesn't need any more advertising. Hell, even the coveted mayor of Mandan endorsed him. Tell me, how am I going to overcome that? He had big oil in his background, so money wasn't going to be a problem. Knocked and knocked and knocked on doors. I came to one door and the lady she said, I'm making a book, and she was being kind of funny about it. Here are the 10 flyers that I got today from your opponent. Here's the 2 postcards you sent me. I said, I'm sorry, I couldn't afford any more. She said, how do you think you're going to beat this guy? And I looked at her and said, well, ma'am, I don't see him here. I'm going to stand and I'm going to ask for my vote. I'm going to be vulnerable, and I'm going to tell you who I am. I'm going to tell you what I stand for, and I'm going to let you slam the door in my face. I'm going to let you ask me whatever question you want, and I'm going to give you my phone number. So if I fail you, call me. Had another guy take my card. I handed him a card, handed his wife the card. He took it, threw it on the ground. And I laughed at him and I said, somebody had to pay for that. And he looked at me and goes, what? I said, somebody had to pay for that. Have a little bit of respect. And then he kind of backed down. I said, I'm just kidding. Picked it up. I said, it only costs about a quarter, but still a quarter's a quarter. I said, well, what's got you so upset? He goes, you're a Republican, aren't you? I said, I am. He goes, I don't like you guys. I said, well, why is that? And he told me why. You all vote the same way. You're all told how to vote, and you all vote the same way. And I introduced myself. I said, no, that won't be me. I'm not told that that's the case, and for the record, that is not the case. But that's what this guy believed. I told him who I was, and he asked me if he could have that card back. And I said, well, what are you going to do with it this time? He took it back, he circled my phone number, and he said, I'm going to put this on my fridge, and as soon as you don't do what you just told me you were going to do, I'm calling. I said, I'll never talk to you. He's never called. He's never called. I've met with many constituents. I'm very easy to get a hold of. Hard work, and I'll be damned if I didn't pull it off and I didn't beat a guy that was as close to an incumbent as there could be without being one. 57 to 43. If I thought that wasn't hard, the session was really hard. At the crossover, I talked to a representative from across the way, and he asked me, he said, how's it going, Doug? I said, you know, Representative Magrum, every day is a different day, but a lot of times I feel 10 feet underwater. And he goes, you're doing just fine. That's what it feels like. I've been here 3 sessions, 6 years. It takes about that much time before you start figuring out what's going on. That's 6 years. I would end with, I do believe North Dakota has the smallest and most efficient state legislature in all of the United States.
All right, all right, big round of applause for both of our candidates, please. They have finished their opening statements, and now we will move to rebuttal statements. Now, I will read you the definition of a rebuttal statement so we're all aware. It says, begins with the rebuttal attempting to defend your argument and to defeat the opposite argument without adding any new information. So that is the general guideline of what a rebuttal is in a debate format. So we will begin with 4 minutes from the supporting side. So we'll welcome Jeff back to the podium.
Thanks, appreciate that. So just some comments about Senator Larsen's, I guess neither one of us are here in our official capacity. We're just representing ourselves, so I probably shouldn't say that because he's Doug Larsen at this event, and I'm just Jeff Magrum. So But we can talk about a little about our experience, what we've seen in the legislature. And he's right. I did tell him that it takes a while to get comfortable. And it does at any job or any position. But I'm on my 6th year. I haven't even achieved my 6th year. And by this term limit, I'd still have 10 more years left. I think all you would get sick of me by the time that time is up. So 16 years is enough in my opinion. I feel comfortable and confident with what I'm doing now. It does take a while, but when you compare experience, we're talking experience. South Dakota has the same term limit, but they only serve 40 days on the even years and 35 days on the odd years. So even though they've been term limited since the early 90s, they've managed to get by with 75 or less days every 2 years. And we've been using about 76 days, roughly 77 days since I've been in out of 80. So they don't use even as many days as we use, and they meet every year, so it's the same days, same experience. And I think Doug is underestimating the experience he's gained. And I'll just use 2 legislators that I worked very closely with last session, Jason Heitkamp. He got in, and he was in 1 session and the special session. But there are bills coming back that were his ideas. Number 1, state health officers should be elected position with all the power and the money they're spending, $4.5 billion budget, and they're appointed by the governor. That should be an elected position. I'm bringing that bill back. That was his idea. He had several other good ideas. One of them was the school tax, using school tax to pay property tax. If you've noticed, there's several different options to cut taxes this time. It was because he was part of that push to reduce property taxes using Common Schools Trust Fund, which is constitutional. So what I'm saying is Jason Heitkamp was in 1 session, and he did a lot. He was on the ball, he worked hard, but he wasn't like me, a county commissioner previously, so he had that experience coming in, working with people and going further. I was even a city commissioner, which he might have been too. Another guy who was so impressive, Jeff Overson. He was on his 2nd session. He had the gala. I mean, I would argue that Jeff Overson was the legislator of the year 2 years ago, because he had the gala, which was very well attended. Scott Hennon was the MC, if anybody remembers that. And then they had the rally out in the Capitol grounds. Over 3,000 people showed up. He got the mask bill passed. It was the most controversial bill besides the vaccine passport bill. But Jeff Overson, in not even 4 years, it would have been 2 years technically, because he got in, served a session. There was a 2-year gap, then he served a session. So really in 2 years, Jeff Overson has proven that if you put your back into this job, you can do a lot. You don't have to be there 20 years to get your feet wet. So those are my examples. And another thing I think it would actually help is when people would share the information they know to the new people coming in, you're going to increase the experience level faster. And you're going to also have these people going back, where they're going to term out, they're going to go back and serve county, they're going to serve school board. They're going to teach people in their communities what's going on at the state. Some of them might go, you know what, maybe I could work up there. Yeah, well, I'll mentor you. Then they'll mentor them, they'll go up there and they'll come in there, guns blazing, doing real good, because they'll have people that want to help them, to help their communities. They're going to share the experiences they know. We're not right now, and I always maintain this information hoarding is a problem, where that's going to get rid of the information hoarding. People will be willing to share the information and help their local communities out, or maybe they just want to go home and live with the rules and laws that got passed, and maybe they don't want to help anybody. I see, including myself, I would be very happy to go home and help someone go up and take my position, the seat, not my seat, it's the people's seat, but I would be very willing to help anybody that was willing to step up and share the information and the knowledge that I've gleaned and gotten paid for by the taxpayers to learn. So that's my rebuttal on that. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim.
Was that for you or for me?
Oh.
So, you were a mayor, city commissioner, county commissioner, House of Representatives, now going to be a senator.
Yeah.
Kind of feels like a career.
Career politics.
Just saying. Oh my. So, where to begin on this? He talked about hoarding information. I've only been there for one session. But when I was a candidate, this evil majority leader, Rich Wardner, I guess, and his hoarding of information put on these weekly caucus meetings for us. Weren't paid, didn't have to be there. Most of us were there. And where they went item by item through it, all summer long. From the first part of June till about the first part of November. Why? So we'd be ready. So we'd have an idea of what this monstrosity of a budget would look like. So we'd have an idea of who some of our people were. I was new then. I wasn't even a senator. I was a candidate, most likely going to win, but just a candidate. We did the same thing this year. You sat in on it. Asked a lot of great questions. I don't know what they do in the House, but I do know what they do in the Senate. And I do know that these evil, long-term people set up a structure so that the information would get out to us. And it happened on a weekly basis. And was it a pain? Did I have other things to do for 3 hours on a Tuesday night? Sure. I could have found other things, but I'd probably been playing with the kids and washing dishes. So it probably wasn't that big of a deal. But that's what we did. Now, Jeff likes to tell us that this term limit is the same as South Dakota's. Jeff likes to tell us that, did you say that it was 40 days and 35 days for the South Dakota? Where did you find that?
It's public record.
Okay. So I found that on Wikipedia. And then I thought, I'm going to prepare more for this debate than just on going on Wikipedia. So I went to their Constitution, and their Constitution reads, regular sessions held each year and shall not exceed 40 legislative days, excluding Sundays, holidays, and legislative recesses. I looked also in their Constitution to see how close their term limits were to our term limits. Their term limits read, no person may serve more than 4 consecutive terms or a total of 8 consecutive years in the Senate and more than 4 consecutive terms or 8 consecutive years in the House. At first glance, that might sound like it's the same. So I called Senator Jean Hunhoff. Just thought she looked like a nice person to talk to. She's from Yankton. We had a nice conversation about one night I spent in Yankton. She explained that yes, indeed, it is 40 days every year, not 40 and 35. We don't always use 40, she said, like us. Sometimes we'll use 38, sometimes we'll use 37, sometimes it's closer to 40. But she said something that I thought was interesting, but Doug, you got to remember we do a 4-day work week. Come again? Yeah. We'll either take Mondays or Fridays off depending on. We do a 5-day work week. So if you take 5, or 80 rather, divided by 5, you have 16 weeks. If you take 40 and divide it by 4, you have 10 weeks. If you multiply 10 by 2, you get 20. I think we can agree that 20 is a higher number than 16. That's just how they do it. It's just talking to her. Now, what I thought was interesting, when I talked to her more, I said, hey, I'm looking at your bio here. It looks like you were first elected in 2001. She said, I was, to the House. And then you were elected to the Senate in 2007 and back to the House in 2015, and most recently back to the Senate in 2021. That's correct. She served for 22 consecutive years. Not the same. Montana. Brought up Montana. 8 years. This is how their Constitution reads. And I followed this up by calling their Secretary of State's office. 8 years per chamber within 16 years. So I can start 8 years in the Senate, and I can't go back for another 8 years. But I can go to the other chamber for 8. And they say they do it all the time. 8, 8, 8, 8. I think you get the point. It's not term limits. It's how long you can consecutively stay in these houses. Florida, in case Florida got brought up, requires a 2-year break. So they're a little bit different. You can serve your time, then you need a 2-year break before you come back in. Florida this every session, 60 days, which is more than us. And then they've got this neat thing called legislative aids. Because as I've talked to some of the proponents, I've said, how can we get all of this stuff done in this limited amount of time if we have this constant turnover? And one of the questions is, one of the comments was, well, maybe you'll just have to have legislative aids like other states do. Interesting. So I called down there to find out what this is all about. Each one gets about 3 aids. They get paid $36,000 per year, plus benefits. Now they get health insurance, but they have to pay a copay. For a family, it's $30 a month. Yep, $30 a month. If you're single, it's only $8 a month, so it's pretty well free. Their life insurance is free, their dental insurance is free, their long-term disability is free, and their matching 401k is free. Well, they have to put their first part in, but the match is. So, these aren't the same. This is that misinformation. This is that information that isn't not even, that's just not true. So, I guess I'll leave it at that for right here.
All right, thank you, Doug. Okay, we have finished the first rebuttal statements. Now, we will be going on to rebuttal statements too, but in the meantime, I'll just take the moment to remind you all, we do have pieces of paper in the back and pens, so make sure you're writing down those questions. We have one more rebuttal section, and then we have closing statements, and we will go to the Q&A after that. So for rebuttal statement 2, let's welcome Jeff back up to the podium.
Well, the bottom line is, what we need here is term limits to change the system we have. We're overspending, we're over-regulating, we're overdoing everything really. For the time we have, we're doing a lot. We're running 1,000 bills through. So I mean, I think what we need to look at is what will this do for our state. Not to worry about whether or not everything is a little different than one state. There's 15 states have term limits. One thing they haven't done is go back to not having term limits. They always keep the term limits they have. So if it was such a hard thing for South Dakota, Montana, Colorado, and so on, why don't they actually get rid of term limits? Because they haven't since the 90s. So it must be working for them. I mean, I maintain South Dakota. I talked to people in South Dakota just this last weekend. They said they left here because our government is too liberal, too over-regulatory. So they went to South Dakota, and I said, will you ever come back? And they said, no, they're not going to come back. They like the government they have. They like the business climate. They like the people they're satisfied with the way everything is going in South Dakota. So whether or not everything is identical, I think overall it's a good move for us to make. So, thank you.
All right, thank you, Jeff.
Well, Jeff, again, you've left some details out. 21 states have had term limits. 6 of them have repealed them. I think that's important. 21 states have had it. That's about 42% of our, well, not about, that is 42% of our number of state legislatures. 6 of those 21 have repealed them. So we only have 30% that haven't. And as I've went over, many of these states' term limits are not what most of us would say are term limits. So I got some other unpacking that we got to do. We talked about how, it was talked about how incumbents cannot be beaten. I don't know where we're getting this 95% from. I'm going to look at 2016 and ask us to think about some things. 2016, we saw a governor of North Dakota get elected with no experience. The incumbent that year was supposed to be Stenjum, Wayne Stenjum, rest in peace. Great man, got beat by someone with no experience. President of the United States, no political experience. Beat the most qualified candidate of all time, or whatever the deal was. Thank God that he ran, thank God that he won. 2016 in the state senate, we had 16 races that had challengers, incumbents and challengers in the general election. Now, if 95% of the time the incumbent wins, only one of these challengers should have won, but 7 of them did. Now, the bigger problem we have in North Dakota really is a lack of candidates, and it's because the Democrats can't win in most areas. We can all acknowledge that. There's many areas that they just aren't going to win, or win very often. So if we really want to see competition, and really want to see how that incumbent will do, we've got to look into the primaries. So I did that for you. The primaries of 2016, 18, and 20. There were 280 races in those 3 years. So how we get there is the Senate would have 2 races in the primary, one for the Republicans, one for the Democrats. The House would have the same. So over those 3 election periods, there were 70 districts up for re-election, 4 each. So that's how we get to the 180. 16 of them were contested. 180 races, 16 of them were contested. That's 6%. In that same period, we had 48 new House members. In that same period, we had 20 new Senate members. That means most of them, the vast majority of them, were uncontested. You didn't even contest a new kid. Just like me. If I had not ran, nobody would have contested my opponent. Of those contested primaries, a lot of it's right up here. Your name and my name of those. So we don't have candidates running. Even for open seats, we don't have candidates running. But the good news is, in 2022, things changed. We had 130 races. So bear with the math on this one. Because we had the redistricting piece, we had 8 other than the odd numbers, we also had 8 even numbers that had to run. And on the House side, we had 9. So bear with that math, multiply that by 4, it all comes together at about 100, it comes together to 130. In this case, there were 24 contested. Still not a lot, but 24. 18%. It went up 300% from before. 18%, 24 contested races. In 8 of those contested races, there was either both of them incumbents, and that's how I counted yours, for instance. Both of you were either not incumbents or incumbents. I didn't know how to, I called you both incumbents. You know what I'm talking about? Or there were no incumbents whatsoever. So 8 of them go up. So there's 16 left where we actually had a challenger and an incumbent going after each other. One of them happened up in Devil's Lake. Judy Estison took on Senator incumbent Dave Elke. Now, I think ratings are sometimes a little bit unnecessary, but the American Conservative Union puts out an annual rating, and they have a lifetime rating. And you can put too much into it, you can put too little into it, there's some middle ground there. Well, Dave's lifetime score was 49%. That ranked him of the 120 Republican legislators in the 67th session. So there was 80 in the House, 40 in the Senate. Of the 120, he ranked 118th. Not very good. Not very good. Judy, with about no money and doing this and uploading a couple Facebook posts, won that race 57-43. Keith Bain, closer to where we're at, ran against Jessica Bell. When she put on a fundraiser, she put on a fundraiser. The who's who showed up. She didn't need to worry about money. Everybody knew who she was. She had name recognition. She had some legislative success. She was a chairperson. She had a lot of things going for her. And Keith Bain said, you know what, I'm going to run. I'm going to challenge her. Keith who? Most people can't pronounce his name if you see how it's spelled. Didn't have the money, didn't have the name recognition. Worked hard. Knocked on the doors. 53-47. Jessica was a 65 on the ACU. 93rd out of 120. So we have no choice. Of those 16 races, getting back to that point, 8 of them were won by the challenger. 8 were won by the incumbent. 50-50. The incumbent's got to win sometimes, right? 50-50. That's not 95%. That's how hard is it to beat an incumbent? I'm not saying it's easy. But there's nothing about this that's easy. There's nothing about the job that's easy. Oh, we need to lower the bar? We have no need for it. 6 states have repealed it. We talked about, well, if it's so hard, if we don't like it, let's just repeal it. Will the big money come back and put it in and help us? Or are we gonna have to do that on our own?
All right. Very good. So that finishes our rebuttal statements section. We will now move to the final section before Q&A, and we will end with closing statements. So let's try to keep these brief at 5 minutes. We'll welcome Jeff back to the podium.
Thanks. I think we've all seen the longtime legislators ignore the plea of the people recently, especially when COVID hit. People were reaching out to the long-term legislators who are generally your majority leaders and your higher up leaders, and they refused to listen to the plea for the legislator to intervene with the governor shutting down not only the polling places, the businesses, he was closed down the schools. So who were they loyal to then? Was it the lobbyists or was it the governor that they were loyal to instead of the people that they're there to serve? Billions of federal aid was spent without legislative oversight. They wouldn't even call us back in and address how to spend the money. Our elderly, they were prisoners in the nursing homes. People forget that already. Our legislators and our governor were not responding to the people, but the lobbyists. Because I remember hearing the lobbyists for the hospitals and the nursing homes. We need to shut them down. We need to shut them down. The schools, the school people didn't want to go to work. Now look at our people, how they're suffering. Our kids, our school scores are way below what they should be. And we're seeing the negative effects of that. And that was because we didn't have a responsive legislature. And that's what this term limits is looking to fix. And remember, Florida and South Dakota didn't shut down. And they're showing that it really helped with their schooling and with their states and the people that they're representing. When this measure passes, it'll take about 10 years for it to really make a change, because it's not going to take effect on the people because the new legislators will be sworn in December 1st, and this takes effect January 1st. So it'll take about 10 years for this to really take effect. So it'll be for the younger groups legislature that this is really going to help. It'll help the young people out. And another thing, this isn't the end of the road. I mean, as Doug said, I have served. I mean, I don't think you consider city and county to be political because there's no RRD beside it. You're mostly a servant. If anybody knows that serves city or county, you're a servant. You're out there in our rural area. You're checking roads. You're out there making sure the garbage is picked up. You're making sure the streets are tarred. It's not a political thing to be, but you can go back and bring that knowledge from what you've learned in politics back to your local government, especially your county or your school board. And so it's not the end of the road. Everybody thinks, oh my gosh, I'm going to term out of the legislature. What can I do? I would like to continue serving. Maybe you want to run for a statewide race. Maybe you want to run for lieutenant governor, United States Congress. There's all kinds of other options. It's not the end of the road to term out of the legislature. You take that information you learned, and then you take it to another level or back home and help your people, whatever. It's not the end of the road. It could be the beginning of the road, actually. I think this is what it'll do. It's going to bring back the true citizen legislature that our founders intended. You're going to not have the career politicians that are up there every year, the same people. It's going to bring fresh energy, new ideas, a government that's responsible to the people and not to the lobbyists. You're not going to, the lobbyists, let's face it, the lobbyists have a lot of power in this state. You've seen them up at the Capitol if you watched any of that press conference. It was full of lobbyists. They are so concerned that they're going to lose their power over this. guess who gets the power back? The people that we're supposed to be serving. That's who's going to get the power back. We take it from the lobbyists, give it back to the people. And the increase in citizen participation. I mean, this primary was very low participation level, the lowest in 22 years. Why? People are losing faith in our government as well as in our elections. We need to do something to get people to want to get involved again. So this will increase citizen participation. And it's going to prevent the governor from trying to be the king, because right now there's no term limits on the governor. So, I mean, do you like our governor that well that you want him there another 20 years maybe? I don't know. There's no limit. He could be there for many, many years. So you'd end up having a kingship instead of a state legislature. And with him and this particular governor trying to buy up so much of the legislators, then you're going to end up with just one kingship is what you'll end up with. It'll stop the information hoarding. People will be more willing to share their experiences, their knowledge, and help their local guys work up to being a good legislature as well. I would just ask that we empower the people again and take our government back. I ask for your yes vote on measure number 1.
Jeff, and we'll have our final closing statement from Doug.
I think we can both agree COVID sucked. I don't know what that has to do with term limits, but we can agree COVID sucked. We're talking about the leadership being stagnant. I do believe there'll be a new leader in the House this year, a new leader in the Senate, a new minority leader in the House, a new Speaker of the House, new caucus leaders in both chambers. Seems like a big leadership change. We talked a little bit before about, we have seen an uptick of people taking their place back. Talk about all our long-term folks. My freshman class just this last session had 6 people, decent amount. This year we'll have at least double that. Minimum will be 12, could be as high as 16. So let's go with 12 as the minimum, plus 6 is 18. That's over a third of a change out between 2 years. Naturally, termed out at the ballot box, the way the Founding Fathers intended this to be. I don't want to take away your freedom to elect the person you want. Some of us actually fought for those freedoms, and I think they ought to be protected. We talk about these lobbyists, that these lobbyists are bad and evil people. Who do these lobbyists work for? A lot of businesses that you are employed with. Schools that you go to, the National Guard. Medical, sure, of course, there's lobbyists there. All of these entities have lobbyists and they have information. I'm not saying that they are the be-all, end-all, but it is possible that these North Dakota-based lobbyists like the limited government that we have. We are the most limited government. Now I'll hear people say, I don't support term limits, but in North Dakota, what choice do we have? Well, again, the incumbents were beat 50% of the time in these last primaries. It's not isolated. That wasn't one person. That was 8 and 8 when they were challenged. These were good people that were challenged. I want to take back our government. You're not conservative enough. You spend too much money. You talked about Jason Heitkamp, a friend of mine as well. In our freshman class, we had 6 people. We had 6 freshmen. I'm going to talk about 5 of us. Jason Heitkamp had a score, ACAU score of 88%, highest in our class. Valedictorian. Followed by Wabama and myself at 83, Connolly and Lem also at 78. You average those up, it's 82. So the 5 of us, our lifetime average right now is 82. That's higher than your lifetime average. Your lifetime average is 80.8. Good, but not as high as ours. If you take the top 20 senators, and I'll get to this point here quickly. If you take the top 20 senators as ranked with the ACU scores from 2021, let me take that back. Let's take the 5 of us out and remain, because the 5 of us are in the top 20. These 5 freshmen, top 20. You take these next 15, their lifetime average, the next highest 15 in the Senate, their lifetime average 70%. In 2021, their average was 76.8. How did it go up by almost 10%? That doesn't include us, the 5. When you include us 5 into it, our average goes up to 78.1%. It's almost 80, and why that's important is if you hit 80, CPAC gives you an award. So we will have 20 folks that are right at the cusp of the CPAC award on average. That's 20. We need 24. We need 24 to hit a majority. Incoming, soon-to-be Senator Magrum, with a lifetime average of more than 80. Keith Boehm, I think we all have high hopes for him. Judy, we have high hopes for them. I'm not going to name any of the others, but there's a few in there that I think we have high hopes for. If I take 20 plus those, all of a sudden we've got a majority. We did it without term limits. We did it by trusting the North Dakota person to do their research. We've got open seats everywhere. Nobody's running. It's not even about beating an incumbent. It's about finding people that will even run against a new person. And somehow this term limits, well, we reduce the pool, is going to somehow increase. Now, why don't people run? Let's think about that for a second. How many people have jobs that allow them to take 4 months off every other year? You either don't have a job yet, or you haven't started your career yet, or you have a job, that you can leave. You could be a college student and take a semester off, or you don't have a job anymore, or you make that sacrifice. That sacrifice isn't appealing to a lot of people. I got a buddy that wants to do this. He drives truck. He says, I can't do it. I can't do it till I'm done driving truck. Wouldn't be fair to my people. There are those that make sacrifices, but I think limiting our pool is not the way to go. I am opposed to term limits. I am not going to ask you for your vote. I'm going to ask you to do what my grandfather asked me to do. Look at all of the information. Think with your own head. If you still think that that's the answer, mind you, on one of these last conversations, I heard some of the founders of this brilliant idea say, is it going to fix everything? No, but on the average, it's not bad. We're going to change our Constitution over something that on the average isn't bad? That's not what the Constitution is for. This does not need to be in the Constitution. The North Dakota people prove it in the primaries of 2022 that they're smart enough to elect the people that they want. They don't need the government restricting their choices.
All right, let's hear a big round of applause for both of our candidates. We have concluded wonderfully on time at 8 p.m. We have concluded the first hour of content. And so now we're going to move quickly into the Q&A session. Just because I don't want to lose anybody, I'm not going to take a break or a recess at this time, unless these guys want to. But you guys doing good? All right. So we're going to move right into Q&A, and we have about 45 minutes slotted out for this. Right now, I do have more questions, so thank you everybody for starting to submit those to me. You can feel free to continue to do that, or if you feel like your question wasn't covered good enough, you can submit it a new way. Write it out differently. But I'm going to start, and I'm going to be fielding these questions directly to one candidate at a time, and then they will dialogue a little bit on those potentially, and we'll switch up who we ask them to, and they'll have opportunity to answer both candidates will have opportunity to answer the question as well. So right away, we're going to go to, we're going to start with Jeff. And the question is, who is harder to replace, good legislators or bad?
Well, in answer to that question, I would say the bad ones, because there's not very many good ones. So, that's just my opinion, but the bottom line is you're actually keeping good men out, in my opinion, because they realize it's gonna be a tough challenge. As Doug said, how many people even have a job where they can go serve up there? So now you're gonna go take off your job to go campaign against a legislator that might have been in there 20 years already, they're incumbent. So you're gonna have to spend all this time and all this money and a chance that you're gonna win. So you're keeping good men out more than losing good men, because he's made my point. I'm already going soft. The freshmen came in and outvoted me already. They're more conservative than I am. I've been in 6 years, I'm already going soft. So that's my point. You go soft after a while. You start listening to lobbyists and the other influences that you shouldn't be listening to. So I think that we're keeping good men on the sidelines rather than keeping everybody moving through the system and letting new people come in with fresh ideas, fresh energy. And so I think that we need to look at how we're holding people back, not actually whether or not they're good or bad, and they're going to turn them out. So thanks for the question.
What was the question?
Question is, who is harder to replace, good legislators or bad?
And can we assume that means taking somebody out, replacing, outing them?
Yeah, whether we're gonna get more bad or whether we're gonna get more good.
I guess I gotta say, I don't know what I'm gonna take a shot at the question as, is it easier to get to defeat a bad legislator? Yes, I think it's easier to do that. I say that I think you can look at the scores, that gives you at least an area to aim at, as to how to take them out. Anybody's beatable. I liked the Speaker of the House very much. He got beat out in his district. He was a good legislator, I thought, and he got beat. I don't want to talk disparaging about any of my colleagues. It's just not my style. I don't think that there's a place for that. But I think it is easier to beat somebody that's ineffective than it is somebody that is effective.
All right, and well, we'll field it back to you, Doug. So in the last legislative session, a term limits bill was presented to the House. Is this measure essentially the same bill?
No, it's not. You could say it is, and I did speak with Jeff about why it wasn't the same bill. Why, if they had came to him and asked him if he wanted to go forward with it, why did they change the bill? I liked his bill. His bill didn't get to the Senate. His bill got in the House. So I didn't get a chance to speak for or against, or cast a vote for or against it. But it put you 16 years and gave you some continuity, which I thought was more important than this. And I asked him very pointedly, why wasn't your bill the one that went forward? And he told me very clearly that the man writing the check wouldn't write the check unless he got to write it his way. And that's a very, very, very good reason to vote against this.
All right, back to Jeff on that one.
What was the question again?
So talking about last legislative session, there was a term limits bill presented in the House. It didn't make it to the Senate. Is this measure the same bill or not?
Okay, the difference is that was my bill, and it was 16 years total. You could do a combination or just one chamber. So it was 16 years, but it was just whatever. You could mix and match however you wanted to do it, and then you were out, and it was a term limit on the governor. So this is very similar. Obviously, it's 8 and 8, so you still get your 16 years. Now Doug keeps bringing up the guy with the check or whatever. Out-of-state money is legal in this state. It's been used for years. I haven't seen anybody try to stop the out-of-state money. As a matter of fact, I looked at his contributions from PACs. He's taken money for his election from 4 PACs that were from out of state. So if out of state
Which
money
4?
is the real big issue, we
Which
got
4?
money from NextEra in Florida.
From where?
You got NextEra Energy, it's on the Secretary of State website.
Okay.
Green New Deal people. You have money from, another one out of Oklahoma. There's another one out of, well, there's 4 of them, you can trust me.
I'll have to look.
Matter
at
of
it.
fact, I got them
do.
right here.
Okay. And could you say the amounts as well?
Okay, you got $300 from BNSF out of Fort Worth, Texas.
BNSF.
Continental
You
Resources.
work in North Dakota, you realize that,
Well,
right?
that's true, but you're talking about out of state money.
But
Oklahoma
BNSF
City.
is in North Dakota.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, $300,
North Dakota.
$300 from that. Okay.
Well, I mean,
What else?
the thing is, you took $500 from Oklahoma City Continental Resources.
Continental Resources, are they in North Dakota as well?
They're branched here, but they're head
So they
office.
are in North Dakota. as
So
well.
are they buying your influence with their lobbyists?
Yeah,
The PAC money?
$500 is sells me. Yep, that's all it takes. Yep. What
How
else we
about,
got?
how about from Marathon Petroleum out of Findlay, Ohio?
They're not in North Dakota either? Or they are in North Dakota?
They have branches, and this is apparently.
So
home office.
is their refinery in my city that I live in?
See, that's the beauty of not taking PAC money. I can't be caught up in this kind of thing where you're asking. You're saying
So how much
one
did they
group
give me?
takes out of state money,
How much
but you
did they
take
give
out
me?
of state money and
How-
that's
how much did they give
okay.
me?
But
How much
nobody's
did they
tried
give
to
me?
stop that.
How much
Nobody's
did
tried
they
to
give me?
stop it and brought a bill forward to eliminate out of state money, so it continually flows in. How many millions of dollars, if you look up, how many
How much-
millions of dollars came into state legislators last election from out of state? You know, and then show how, it was millions, many,
So
many
far, we
millions.
haven't hit 1,000 yet.
Maybe you didn't, but if you had all the
No, but
legislators
you're
together.
talking about.
You got $250 from North Dakota, or NextEra Energy out of Florida.
And they're not in North Dakota either?
But they're here and they're trying to buy their influence on you
For
by giving you money.
$250. What did Marathon give me? I didn't get that.
Well, you took the money. If it's not that much money, why did you take it to begin with?
Is
You're
this
saying,
about,
what's $500?
is this about
Why did you
term
not
limits, or
bother
is this-
taking it then?
so was Marathon 500?
Marathon was.
Let's move on from this topic. Just, I know you were kind of on a point here, Jeff, so maybe
We were
segueing-
talking about the term limit.
segueing to the next question, you know, which I'll field back to you on that influence of lobbyists, which we were kind of getting at. Do you think that PAC money helps long-term legislators with elections?
Yes, of course, because the long-term legislators get 5,000. Doug's first time, he got 500. Now that he's shown he'll take the money, the next time it'll be 5,000, or 2,500. I mean, that's how it goes. Is first they try to get you hooked. With shekels come shackles. That was the old saying. There's a reason they give money, and they've told me that. We need to buy friends. I've had a lobbyist come up to me and say, "Hey, Magrum, we need you. We need to buy friends on this bill." And but I won't take PAC money. I never have, and I'm not going to start now. But when someone says, "Well, it's only $500," well, then why'd you take it? If it's $250, why'd you take it? You dirty up your name for a couple $1,000s, which is nothing in the scheme of things. So there's obviously a reason they take the money, and there's a reason it's given. And the reason it's given is to buy influence. Because I've seen these lobbyists in action. They'll come in and they'll put their arm around the guy and say, "Hey, we need you today, buddy." And thank goodness I never took money, because there's been bills that have been reversed by the Supreme Court where these lobbyists have pressured us all day long. And I always say to them, "My gosh, what do you do to the guys that took the money?"
Jeff, not to cut you off there, but I think we do have the question fully answered. So I want to give Doug an opportunity to kind of answer both of those questions, and then I'll throw another one back at Doug and then back to you, because I'm keeping in that line of thought. But we'll give Doug an opportunity, just talking about the influence of lobbyists.
Can I respond to
Yep.
some of
Yep, you
what
certainly
my
can.
colleague here said? So 83% was my score on the conservative side. Your lifetime rating is 80.8. I'm not sure how far I've been bought by what looked like $1,000. So yes, campaigns do cost money to raise, and yes, I put 30,000 of my own into my account. So those companies you're talking about, I think I'm really struggling to understand how that's really out of state. Even anybody that has any business experience whatsoever understands that there can be parent companies that operate within different states. But if we want to really dive into this, your bill then has taken, as of the other day, $825,000 to do it their way. There's been about $6,000 contributed from the state. If you add from within the state, if you add those two numbers up together and divide it out, that means 99.28%. So often people will exaggerate and say, I'm 99% sure of this. This is more than 99%. We are going to sell our Constitution to U.S. term limits. If you go to their website, I'm sure you're going to tell us to do that, you'll see that it is all about constitutional, about the Congress. Very little to do about states. We talked so much last year about Zuckerbucks. I heard so much from you about Zuckerbucks that I wondered if it was an actual currency. Zuckerbucks, Zuckerbucks, Zuckerbucks. What is this billionaire doing, pumping money in? We can't trust Zuckerbucks. But now we can, and that was to help with an election, adding in a time when it was very confusing for many people. But this one's to change our Constitution, and we don't seem to have a problem with this one. And we're going to point out that maybe I took, I never did catch the amount from Marathon, so I don't know for sure. I guess it is technically a little more than 1,000 from businesses that do operate in my area. Did they buy my votes? No, I don't think they did, and I don't think you could find any proof that my vote was swayed. I stand by my voting record. Now, what was the question I was really supposed to answer?
Well, looking at, does PAC money help long-term legislators with elections?
I think Jeff and I have both proven that money, Keith Bain proved it, Judy Estison proved it, money does not win elections. Money alone does not win elections. Judy, I believe, spent $5,000 of her own money. Almost all of my money came out of my back pocket. Almost all of Keith's money came out of his back pocket. I don't know where Jeff's money came from. It probably came out of his back pocket. We were all overspent by our opponents by gross amounts. Probably the king probably wins. I was probably triple spent. He was way more than triple spent. Keith was way more than triple spent. Judy was way more than triple spent. We all won. We all won. I mean, money's part of it, but I don't think it's what decides. People decide, and whether you can get to those people in campaign. So no, I don't think it influences people nearly as much as some would want us to believe it does.
Okay, so then,
and I'm using actual examples,
right? Not
just talk about. I once talked to a lobbyist once that told me I needed to blah blah blah, and I'm actually giving examples that are real and factual.
So then, new question, which we'll give to you, and then we'll get back to Jeff. So if term limits passes, can and how could it be changed or changed back? What happens next if that takes the case?
From my understanding of reading the bill, they have added even to make it. They've made it to be one of the most restrictive term limits of all the places. They brag that all these other states have term limits. And when you dive in like I did into what these actual states limit, they don't. They don't limit. South Dakota loves it. Yeah, of course, it doesn't limit anything. Montana loves it. Doesn't limit anything. Florida loves it. Yeah, there's a slight limit. They got to take a 2-year break, but they get the AIDS and everything else. So there's a little bit there. This one restricts all of that. They've added a clause. I assume it will be found constitutional if it's challenged, that it would require that the measure to get it back on the ballot. So right now, on many things, like the bill Jeff had put forward before, would allow the legislature to basically fast track it to the ballot. Doesn't pass it, just puts it on the ballot faster. The marijuana folks have always asked us to do that. Just put it on the ballot, let the people decide. So there is that method usually, and then the other method is to gather the signatures. Now, of that money that was spent, Yeah, a record amount of people signed this petition, absolutely. And a lot of money was spent gathering those. It's legal, I'm not saying it's not legal, but you can't say it's wrong and then it's right, because it's how I see it at least. So we would have to, if we were to repeal it back, the way the measures is written and I understand it, is somebody again would have to gather the signatures to put it back on the ballot for the people to vote. And that's why the billionaire here is rest assured, his measure, if it gets passed, which I don't think it will, but if it gets passed. I do think the people of North Dakota, I have confidence in them, like they've shown in 2022's primaries, where when they dig into it, they get it right. And I do think before Election Day, enough people will dig into it and get it right.
Okay.
And if all the truth is out, I think the average person, they're already finding their sponsors are dropping off on this thing. So.
Sure. All right, so thank you, Doug, on that. So then back to Jeff again. If term limits passes, what are your thoughts? How could it be changed? Can it be edited? I've heard it tossed around. Could it be just the governor? Those kinds of things. What are your thoughts on that?
All it would take is for the legislature, basically what I intended to do last session was, it has to be constitutional. When Doug talks about these other states rescinding it, those were legislators that put it on, that rescinded it later because for whatever reason, that was an in-house thing. And some of them had to be done constitutionally, so they had to rescind them. And so that's why we can't change it on the national level, because a state can't change the national constitution. You can't just make a term limit, it has to be constitutional. So that's why they had to rescind them, because of lawsuits. The legislators passed it, and then they got a lawsuit that said, hey, you can't have term limits statutorily, you have to do it constitutionally. So my bill last session would have been to put it on the ballot. It wasn't to make a term limit. So what you do is this legislature could meet this, when we meet this winter, could say, hey, the people term limited us. Why don't we add all the other state races? We could change the term. We can put it all on the ballot. The legislature can sponsor it so that there doesn't have to be any signatures gathered, and then it can be put on the ballot. That's how it works. It's called a referendum. But you put it on the ballot again, and so we can do that as a legislature, give the people the option, and they can say yay or nay. But especially if it passes very strong, we could add other state, because that's what I'm hearing from people. They love the term limit, but they wish we'd added Attorney General, Secretary of State, and so on. So they would like them added. And so I don't disagree with that. So we could actually, like I say, sponsor it as a legislature, get it on the ballot, and then move forward with that. So one thing, he keeps bringing up out-of-state money, but guess who? It was mostly North Dakotans that circulated. Well, he had to be a North Dakotan to circulate the petition. You had to be a North Dakotan. So it was North Dakotans circulating the petition, and it's going to be North Dakotans voting on the petition. And Howie Rich, the guy that he's accusing of being this big evil overlord, is a plumber. He's a plumber. He invested in, he's just like me, but he's smarter. He invested in land at a young age, and the land created a lot of wealth for the man. But he's a plumber, Howie Rich. So check him out. He's quite an interesting guy. He's in his 80s, and he believes the only way this country can be saved is through term limits. And if we get enough states to pass term limits, he thinks that that'll lead to getting a national term limit on our U.S. congressmen. And that would be one way of doing it. It's just a different way he's approaching it. If he can get 25, 30 states on term limits, they're going to be more acceptable to going to we'd have to have a constitutional convention to get term limits on the national level. Right now, people are scared of a con because it could be runaway convention, and they could do all kinds of damage. But I mean, that's what they're hoping for, is that we'll get enough people to get a national term limit, and he's hoping that'll save the country.
Yeah. So.
Can I have a moment to rebut?
You got a comment? Yeah, you can give a comment. I'm gonna field the question back to Jeff.
Any amendment to this article could not be proposed by legislation, but only by citizen initiative. That's what it says.
Is that on the measure?
That's on the measure. You are a sponsor of the measure, and you just told us that the legislature could amend it. That is my problem with this. We have pushed out misinformation from day one. We continue to. I urge people to think with their own head, look at the measure, read it yourself. I didn't make up what these other states do. I didn't pull stuff from Wikipedia. I pulled stuff from constitutions. I pulled stuff from the state governments of said places. Unless I'm misreading it, and I read it word for word. So if somebody else, you're a lawyer, aren't you?
What you could do is have a whole new measure. You wouldn't amend this one, you'd have a whole new measure based on adding state office holders into
I guess
the term limits.
a lawyer would have to read it better. That's
Yeah.
not how I read it.
Any amendment to this one, but you could have a new measure sponsored by the legislature, put on the ballot, saying you want attorney general and.
That's adding
That's
to
what,
it.
that's
I don't
all
think
I
that's
was
what the
trying to do
question
last
was.
session, is trying to get it on the ballot, and I asked the legislators, based on the polls, to support it, and I was willing to work on terms, but nobody would work with me, they just put it to a vote, we had 12 votes, and, but we can have a measure, we can't amend this one, but what we can do is have a measure sponsored by the legislature to add other office holders on to.
So just to
Term
clarify,
limits.
what we're talking about here, is the question, if term limits passes, how or what can be done to be changed? So, Jeff arguing in support, he's saying we want more term limits, so he's saying this is what we would do to increase this, whereas Doug is arguing in opposition. So he's bringing up the point that the actual wording in the measure says that, we can't have the legislature amend this. It has to be exactly in this same process. In order to be changed, it has to be killed the same way it was put on, right? What's that?
Implementation.
Implementation? Is that the appropriate word for that?
If it's implementing the bill itself, but if they offered a new bill, it
Right.
would change it, but I can see how.
I could
Well,
see a
it's
Supreme
confusing.
Court
Right.
getting involved on something like that and
Yeah,
saying,
exactly.
your new bill is amending this, but this is already in the Constitution.
Right.
Once it's in the Constitution, it is constitutional. So, again, not being a lawyer, is what you're saying possible?
Right.
I don't know.
It's
So,
confusing. It's
I
like
think-
word-
You can't, it says
But
you
they
can't
added
amend
that-
this measure.
They added
this
that
measure.
clause, which is very different than any other state.
So I think the point, and Rory is my parliamentarian, so I defer to him on that. I think he's making the point that it's legalese that we're getting into here, and that's kind of what you're bringing up. And then, Jeff talking about the idea that, if it does pass, we can still add something. If it passes overwhelmingly, for example, then they would want, or he would want to submit something that would increase term limits and bring them to more offices. So, recognizing, more research to be done there or more questions we might have, but I want to get a little bit more philosophical just with one or two questions here. We've taken up about 26 minutes, so I want to make sure we keep our audience on track with everything we're talking about, and I do want to get through a few more of these questions. So the idea here, the question being, this will start with Jeff. Do we have an inalienable right to choose who we want to represent us?
Well, term limits was not covered in the Constitution as an alienable right. So the Constitution can be changed state and nationally by the people, whether it's initiated measure process or on the national level constitutional convention. An alienable right means they're God-given rights. So there's nothing in the Constitution about the God-given rights that can't be taken away or given up. That would be inalienable. So no, this isn't inalienable. And it doesn't take away people's rights. What you're doing is giving them more rights to vote for more people that are willing to step up to the plate rather than the same old incumbent all the time. So actually, I would argue that it increases people's rights.
Right, and the question is open-ended, so it's however you want to go with it. Same question for Doug.
This measure will reduce it. It will absolutely reduce your ability to pick it. Again, I would just tell you, looking at the data, 180 races, only 16 of them were contested. In that same period of time, we put 68 new people in. If all of the contested races were within new people, 52 people were brand new, at least. That's a minimum in that period of time. No challengers. I think, yeah, it absolutely will reduce, you're right. It'll say, you're not smart enough to decide when it's time for this person to stop serving in the position that you're willing to allow them to serve. You're just not smart enough. And I'm not going to believe that. I'm going to believe that our people are smart enough to do the right thing. When we talk about taking back our government, we're getting more conservative. We need to be, your legislator needs to reflect the fabric of the community. And if it doesn't, it's the community's job to fix that. It's the district's job to fix that. And we're seeing all kinds of wonderful organizations pop up that are doing that very thing, holding us accountable like they should. We had a wonderful, absolutely wonderful We the People rally during the special session in November. Wonderful amount of people got there, got to meet a half a dozen of them on more of a personal level, and friends with them to this day. Shook a lot of hands, but it was great to see them there. I disagreed a little bit with how some of the action went, and I talked to some of their leaders and said, golly, if you had just asked for a couple things, we could have absolutely had people ready to talk to you. You showed up, we didn't have an agenda of what you wanted. People think that we ignored them. And in fact, three senators went and met with that group, I being one of them, 6 o'clock that night, got in front of the whole group. Hey, what questions do you have? Interacted with them. They're the people of North Dakota. They're the good, solid patriots. The folks that we need to embrace this, they're doing that. And that's reflected in this last deal. We need to keep that momentum. We don't have a problem. We don't need to be another notch on a evil warlord. Is that what I'm calling him now? I don't believe I called him that, but we don't need to be another notch. If his goal is to get 30, we don't have to be number 16. And yeah, 6 states have repealed it. They loved their term limits so much that they repealed them.
So, in that same vein, do you think incumbents are losing because people are tired of the long-sitting legislators?
Maybe. Incumbents are losing because the challenger is actually there. I mean, all those uncontested races means none of those incumbents were ever challenged. I had a phone call from a friend of mine up in Minot. I'm not going to name the gentleman's name. A sitting senator said, hey, you won an election once. You guys been in more than I have. I said, yeah, in fact, I did win. Thanks. How'd you do it? Well, this is well after. This isn't a get to know you kind of thing. I said, why are you asking? Because I think I'm going to be challenged. I said, oh, okay. I said, well, run the race that you ran before. Doug, I've never been challenged before. This is my X number of years in, and nobody has ever challenged me. You know who the challenger was? I don't know either, because they didn't show up. They couldn't find somebody to challenge this person. This person was vulnerable. He knew he was vulnerable. He knows today that he's vulnerable. Whoever would have challenged him knew he was vulnerable. Minot's got a lot of stuff going on. You know, they're the heart and soul of this conservative push. They couldn't find anyone in his district. I don't know why. I don't think it was because the incumbent was so powerful and so mighty. They just couldn't find somebody that was willing to do it.
All right, so back to Jeff on that. Do you think incumbents are losing because people are tired of long-sitting legislators?
Yes. I think people would like more turnover, and this term limit measure is gonna help with that. You're gonna have more turnover, people that are, Doug is using examples, he's just a freshman legislator. He's stepping up, he's working for the people, but after he's in for 30 years, he's gonna get hardened all that. That's what we see. They get hardened, they don't wanna be responsive, they don't answer emails. I know from the two I was in with in 28, The people liked me because I was fresh, I was new, and I answered emails, I answered phone calls, and the other two didn't. So I ended up getting their phone calls and emails. But the problem is I'm starting to wear out a little bit too from that. So, and they'll say, well, the other two never answered me and you do. And so I find that they pile on to the new guy, right? So, but why? Because the new guy has fresh energy, he wants to serve well, he wants to make a name for himself, but after they're in for a while, they get comfortable and they don't get a challenger because you hear it all the time in my old district. Well, why don't you run for the Senate position? Well, I'll never beat him. He's been in for so long. It's going to be so hard. There's people out there that would love to run for these positions. It's just a cop-out saying there's nobody there because we all know that as soon as there's an opening, you'll have 3 or 4 people stepping up. I've never had an uncontested, whether it was city, county, and a lot of times it was up to 4 of us running for one position. I've never had a time where I didn't have an opponent, so I don't know. I mean, I suppose it happens occasionally, but have we ever seen a seat go empty? I mean, no. So I mean, that's kind of reaching there to say nobody would take the job. If there's an opening, they'll come for it, and I think there's a lot of people that would love to serve this great state.
Sure. So then, with the problem that we're solving here, if we were to ask what is the problem that term limits are supposed to solve, is the problem the elected, the people that are elected, or the electors, the actual people that need to do the voting?
Well, the electors aren't going to change, I don't suppose, because I know from my own race, we worked hard, we begged people, please help us, we need votes, and some of them people that we were sure were going to vote didn't vote. So I don't know how you get these people engaged. It's very frustrating as a candidate. The election cycle is so long that I think it's not a special election day anymore like it used to be. So how do you get them involved any more than they are? I mean, the Revolutionary War was fought by 3% of the country. I mean, it's always been a smaller amount of people that have been involved in running the government. So what the people that are involved would like to see more turnover, some fresh faces. Now, if you look at the statistics, the average legislator only serves 8 years. That's not the problem. There's many, like Doug said, many of them are coming, many of them are going. It's the cabal, the leadership that I talked about earlier that have been 40 years, 45 years, 31, 32 years. They're the ones running the show. They're the ones that are hoarding information. They're not sharing it. And yes, now that I'm going to the Senate, Senator Wardner put on wonderful Tuesday night classes with us. We never had that in the House. We maybe caucused every once a month, maybe on a good month, twice a month as a group. We never had caucuses. So what I'm saying is that maybe the Senate was more open than the House. I don't, apparently it was.
Be careful, your friends are watching.
Yeah, well, it wasn't open at all in the House because they were hoarding information. They didn't want the competition from some of us, so they didn't share the information. So yeah, I think the people are tired of the same people all the time, and I have no doubt people would wear out for me. Maybe they are already, but keep new people coming in, keep the excitement, keep the new ideas going, and give the government back to the people instead of the lobbyists.
All right, thanks, Jeff. We'll turn that back to Doug. What is the problem at term limits that they are to solve? Is it the elected or the electors?
I don't think it solves. I really just don't think it solves anything. Thank you for agreeing that the Senate doesn't hoard information. If in fact it is a problem in the House, the good news for the House is they're getting a new leader, a new assistant leader, a new speaker, a new caucus leader. All of those are coming. I don't think term limits has anything to do with that. The turnover, I don't know what it is. If turnover is good or turnover is bad, we'll have had 18 to 22 new senators in our chamber of 47 within 2 sessions. It's a lot of turnover. The appropriation chair on the Senate side is gone. We don't need to talk about why, but he's not there anymore. The appropriation chair on the House. The committee that's probably the most powerful, both chairmen are gone. The leader in the Senate also gone. There will be a new caucus leader. Seems like a lot of new leadership coming our way, with new ideas, with new blood. I think it's up to the electors. I think the voters showed when given a choice, they'll do the research. In 3 races in the House this year, 3 races, one up in Minot, Lori Van Winkle, top vote getter, no political experience, gets more votes than Jeff Halverson, gets more votes than a former legislator in Roscoe Shriley, most votes. Some kid named Holly Dawson or something or other, maybe you've heard of him, 18-year-old kid, gets the most votes, beats out a very conservative, long-term House member. Most votes, worked his ass off. I don't think PAC money had much to do with that race. I think hard work did. I think he got to enough of the people, put his case before enough of the people, and enough of the people said, yeah, I like you. Let's give it back. We never lost the government. We want to say we did. If we did, we're getting it back. We're getting it back by putting new people in. We're growing more conservative. The stats are there. 82% out of a freshman class. We know that we've got 3 big hitters coming in and probably a lot more. We know that our rate is right at about increased to just under 80%. Granted, it was lower. I'll give you that. The running average before the freshmen came in, that had nothing to do with term limits. Jeff's bill hadn't been introduced. We didn't get to see Jeff's bill. We raised it by adding a couple good people, and a couple more people have been added. A couple more people after that will be added, and people just need to stay involved.
All right, so kind of wrapping up, we just have a couple more questions I want to get to here to hit on the mark. But so for you, Doug, is it fair to say that term limits wouldn't be a conversation if there was less tax money or less spending to basically fight over? How does that play into it? The tax.
I would say it probably doesn't play into it all that well. And the reason I would say that, if we want to go back to South Dakota, yes, they do spend, they have a lot less money to spend, and they do spend a lot less money than we do. I don't think their road infrastructure is quite as good. I don't think their health and human service is nearly as good. I'm not saying that those aren't programs that we shouldn't take a strong, good look at in North Dakota. I'm not saying that we shouldn't cut. I'm not saying that we shouldn't find ways to give more money back. That will be a major focus. We are putting the right people in place to shift that. Yes, some of it has to start with cutting some of the spending. We are a blessed area. We could, try not to go too far down this rabbit hole, but one of the big things that we're going to talk about in this coming session will be property taxes. Property taxes. Everybody hates property taxes until you really start to wrestle with that pig and go, that's at the local level. What happens if we take all of the property taxes over on the state? God, that sounds good. I own stuff that pays property taxes. God, I like that. A lot of us in this room own houses. Boy, that'd be nice. Some of us that are in this room that don't own houses know that, man, if there weren't property taxes on there, I could own a house. God, that'd be nice, especially now with interest rates as high as they are. But then we've done that. The legislature has pumped billions of dollars into the local areas to pay down different programs, and it just grows back. It's like one of those morphine, you cut the finger off and it grows back, and this time it's fatter and it's bigger. So we've got to be careful about how to do that. So when a person complains to me about their property taxes, I can ask them, did you go to the county commission meeting where they talked about the budget? Did you go to the city commission where they talked about the budget? Because that's where it started. When your budget grew, that's where it started. What programs are you willing to do away with? Are you willing to tell the police chief, we don't need any more? We don't need new vehicles. We don't need this. Are you willing to tell that to the fire department? I know I got off topic a little bit, but no, I don't think, one has to do with the other, because South Dakota would have less taxes, less spending. They have term limits, North Dakota doesn't at the moment. You know, I think this guy sees us as a cheap date. $1 million in North Dakota goes a long way, and we're one more notch in that bedpost.
All right.
I guess he needs 30.
What do you say on that, Jeff? Would it be as much of a conversation if money wasn't involved? And this is regarding how we spend
Yeah.
our money in North Dakota.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Daryl. Of course, if we were cutting property taxes, if we were cutting income taxes, sharing the wealth with the people, investing wisely, the legacy fund dollars, the common schools trust fund, constitutionally, the schools were supposed to be paid for by the common schools trust fund. Now, we got away from that years ago and we never went back, but that's half of everybody's property tax. So we could easily straighten that out. There's over $7 billion in the common schools trust fund. But we don't do it because of the long-term legislators don't want to give up that money. They like to have this money because that's where their power is. Knowledge and money bring power. That's the way it is. And so, but Doug keeps talking about how efficient we are, and he brought up the human services compared to South Dakota. I don't know if anybody watched the Legislative Audit and Fiscal Review Committee or Josh Gallian's reports. We have a totally bloated human services department that's so mismanaged, it's ridiculous. I mean, we have children that are supposed to be checked on within a day or two of being reported as being abused. The average is 13 days. We have vaccines that are stored improperly and they're injecting them into people. We have, there's special funds that are depleted already, even though with a $4.5 billion budget, they don't have any requirements for people to access some of these funds, and they're handing them out like Halloween candy. And so anyway, they came and they said, well, we have funds that are depleted already that we're supposed to make it through this year. So there's so much mismanagement up there that our government is too big. And it's a symptom of having a lot of money, but we're not giving the money back to the people. That's right. That's exactly why there is a civil unrest, essentially, because we have all this income and we're not sharing, and people are struggling. Gas is high, housing's high. I mean, you name it, it's gone up. You know, whether it's double or triple. You know, you could argue they have these statistics that it's only gone up 10-12%, which is erroneous. I don't know what they're looking at, but yeah, people are getting tired of not sharing in the wealth, especially in North Dakota. We could have got rid of property tax. We could have been rid of income tax. And when they say the state doesn't influence property taxes, I don't know, we got a 60 mil minimum for the schools. If the schools don't charge 60 mils on their property tax, then they don't get all the state funding. So what they do is they overcharge their people on purpose to get the state funding. And so there's a lot of schools and districts that are sitting on a pot of money. There's counties sitting on pots of money. They're just, I mean, some of these counties have $100 million in the bank. They could lower the property tax, but then the state will start hammering on them, so they're scared of that. So they just keep letting the money build up, and hopefully they can do a big project with it someday, redo a bunch of their own roads. But we have caps, we have minimums, and those come from the state. So the state does definitely affect your local property taxes. And sales tax, all the sales tax is by the state. And then you even have home rule charter where the counties can even add more, the cities can add more, but the state does have the sales tax and the income tax.
Yeah. All right, so stay right here. Final question, wake the audience back up. You know, we've heard a lot of things, and in this last legislative season, you know, we have on one hand a very interesting governor who has, you know, shown some colors as to who he wants to support for the future of our state. You know, we have on the east side of our state especially some more liberal things, critical race theory. We have Gates and other outside parties involved in land purchases. We have China. On the west side, you know, we have booming oil economy and many people from out of state coming into North Dakota and bringing new ideas and some staying, moving to Bismarck. So that's one thing. And then looking at on a more positive side, we have over 10 young Republicans that won this year in the primaries, the most ever. So we have the largest freshman class that will be entering our legislature this year for young Republicans, and that's just the beginning. So keep that in mind. I want, as our final question here, give me your vision for the future of North Dakota, and really whether it involves term limits or not, what you believe is happening now, what we're on the cusp on in the next 4 to 12 years in North Dakota.
Well, what I see happening is, if term limits passes, especially, we'll become even more conservative. But we need to get back to sharing the wealth with our people. When people should want to move to North Dakota because they don't have property taxes, or they don't have income taxes. So that's what I see. I see people living better here. I see us taking back our schools, getting rid of a lot of this social engineering, or whatever you want to call it, with the critical race theory and things like that. Either there's going to be more people going toward homeschooling, or we straighten our public schools. I think we need to stand strong against a lot of these attacks on our children in the state. I see us totally eliminating abortion, which we should have done already. I mean, there's some judge somewhere standing up against he's actually has more power than the United States Supreme Court at this point. And so we need to, I see us prospering, but I think we need to stand up against the Green New Communist deal that is coming in here, and they're setting up, they want to stick windmills everywhere, they want to put solar everywhere, they want us to sit in the dark on the cold days where there's no wind and sun, and they want to get rid of our coal. I think we need to stand up to them and show some backbone and tell them, no, we're not going to go your way. And by the way, if you want power when you're sitting in the dark and there's no sun and wind blowing over east, then call us and we'll think about giving you some energy resources. And if California wants to be picky with our ethanol, we'll just tell them, well, you're cut off. We'll sell it somewhere else, even if we take less money. How much money we're going to spend on this carbon capture? You'd be better off to take less money and tell them, you know what, we don't need you no more. Cut back on production if that's what it takes, because even after they set up this carbon sequestration, it's not going to be cheap to operate. So it's going to drive the prices of fuels up, and we need to really push for state sovereignty so that any of these unconstitutional, in the next 2 years that the Biden administration tries to push any unconstitutional executive orders on us, that we can nullify them, whether it's a gun grab or absolute mandatory vaccination, anything like that. We need to stand up to them. We're doing it in other ways. We need to do it as a whole. And I have a bright look on our future. I have children and grandkids, and that's why I'm serving. I didn't serve in the military, and I felt it was my duty to be a civil servant. So that's what I'm doing, and I think people are embracing a more conservative state again, and I'm looking forward to that. I know our children are very conservative, and the young Republicans are very conservative. I want to thank you guys for having this tonight, and I appreciate what the young Republicans are doing. You guys really have given me a lot of hope for the future, because it's such a good organization, good people. So I'm very optimistic, but I think there's things we need to keep working on to work toward that goal. So thank you.
Final thought from Doug on vision for our future.
Vision for our future. I do think we can do more for property taxes. There is at least one measure out there right now that would cut your school funding in half, which would reduce your property taxes by 25%. I visited with that gentleman, and I may have a more aggressive plan coming that might look similar to. One of those two are going to pass. I think that is going to be a sustainable reduction in property taxes that won't allow it to continue to swell like we've seen in the past. North Dakota's a great place to live right now. I think part of it is we've got to keep some of that. I build houses for a living, and I've watched people move to our state, and they'll say things like, God, the people sure are friendly around here. And I'll say, they are, and I'll keep it that way. We don't need your riffraff coming in and being argumentative. But we are a great place to live. I think we need to continue to work on economic development. We've got great cornerstones in this state. We've got ag second to none. If we look out at, just as a small example, at what Blackleg does out on their ranch, and as they continue to try to redefine what it is that they do, those are going to be things that we're going to have to be creative about. I think those agriculture, we need to continue to invest in that piece. We've got great opportunities in energy. Whether it's coal, continue to protect against the federal government, continue to protect our way of life is going to be important, whether we're talking about guns, whether we're talking about religion, whether we're talking about things that are taught in schools, etc. Those are things that we're going to have to continue. That's what made us a great place to live, to raise our kids. I'm actively raising kids myself, and I want them to grow up here, and I plan to live here for quite some time. We've got a good business sector. If these property tax reductions happen, as we're talking about, this is a great influencer. Jeff and I absolutely can disagree on term limits, but I think we can absolutely agree. The more money we give back to the people, who cares what they do? I don't care if you go on vacation. I don't care if you invest it, you buy another house, you start a business, you enhance the business that you got. Giving it back to those people will, in and of itself, allow this to prosper. So there are some difficult decisions that we're going to have coming up. We're going to have a lot of money in this legislative session to spend, and we're going to have to decide, how much do we give back? How much do we take care of infrastructure? We do have trouble with our roads. We haven't talked about that, but our bridges and our roads are not in great shape in some areas. They're in very bad, dangerous shape in some areas. We've got bridges that we're having to just replace because we just opted not to maintain it. If you talk to a farmer and say, hey, here's your combine, don't worry about maintaining it, you can buy another one in 10 years, I'm sure it'll work out. That's not their conservative lifestyle, but that's how we've seen. So some of that will have to go. We have a constitutional duty to provide that. We do need to make some changes to our schools. We do need to continue to hold them accountable and look for improvements. But I think we also have to be smart about it when we look at how these tests are taken by some of these kids. And I'll admit that, Everett, if you're watching, my first grader did not do as well on one of his tests this year as he should have, because he got bored and he admitted it afterwards, and he just zeroed through it. Are our kids really taking some of these tests? Do we? So I sometimes wonder if we test our kids too much, if we hold them too much to this national standard that doesn't tell us a whole hell of a lot anyway. Or are there other ways to do it? We've got holes, we got problems. We've got the young people that you talked about coming in, a lot of new people. So we can talk about folks that are hoarding all of this and preventing all of this, but when we have that kind of a turnover, if we're not holding these new people accountable, they can make the change. I saw the change last year in the Senate. It's documented, talked about it. We saw the conservative people that weren't very conservative, were kind of conservative, become a lot more conservative. I think we're going to continue to see that. That's continue to protect our rights. Is this our last thing? Am I done now forever?
Yeah,
This is it?
Yeah.
Like Grandpa Elf said, think with your own head on this. You can agree with Jeff, vote yes. You can agree with me, vote no. Do your own research, look into it. I believe what I laid out was a convincing argument, but of course I'm a little bit biased. Thank you, Jeff, for being my friend, helping me through my first session. Thank you for allowing me to know that we can have this kind of a conversation and still come out of it the other side. At least I think so. I guess I'll check my tires when I thank you, the young Republicans, for putting this on. You guys did a fantastic job.
All right.
I thought you were going to say we never were, or something like that.
All right, so big thank you to our candidates, and of course, you can ask questions, and the phone number is very easy to find if you have more questions. didn't
And the
get them
bar's
tonight.
open.
The bar's open, Doug says. All right, make sure to visit that. Anyway, so thank you all for coming. This has been the first Young Republicans hosted debate. My time is limited. I went out on a limb to do this because I've already turned down this kind of opportunity like 3 times, but I'll do it for Young Republicans. So thank you all for coming,
Thank you.
and we'll do it again sometime.